As society shifted from hunter-gatherer life to agriculture around 10,000 years ago, daughters were transformed from family members into commodities tied to land, wealth, and inheritance. Because paternity could not be biologically proven, cultures obsessed over the only evidence they believed they had: the female body before marriage. From fire, smoke, and water to blood-stained sheets and body measurements, these tests claimed to reveal purity, but instead exposed fear and control. Some women passed by chance, many failed by design, and the consequences were often irreversible. Stay with us, because these are the 10 most bizarre virginity tests ever used in the past, leaving you questioning how humanity ever called this justice. Number 1, we begin in classical Greece with one of the earliest and most bizarre virginity tests ever recorded, rooted in a deeply flawed medical belief. Ancient Greek physicians believed the female body was a hollow, continuous tube called the hodos, running from the vagina directly to the mouth and nose. This serious anatomical misconception led to a so-called scientific verification method known as gynecological fumigation. In this ritual, a woman was seated on a stool with a hole in the center, while pungent substances were burned beneath her body. The Greeks believed that a virgin woman had internal genital passages that were closed or tightly constricted, preventing smoke from traveling upward. If a woman had experienced sexual penetration, those passages were thought to be opened, turning the hodos into a ventilation shaft. During the test, a mixture of sulfur, resins, chopped onions, and powerful herbs such as wormwood or mugwort was burned beneath her. If the woman could smell the fumes on her own breath, or if observers detected the odor of onions coming from her mouth or nose, it was declared undeniable proof that her virginity was lost. If no scent was detected, her purity was considered intact because the internal path was believed to be blocked. This ritual completely ignored basic reality, since anyone sitting over burning onions would naturally smell of them through ordinary inhalation and external contact. Despite its obvious absurdity, this test was treated as medical truth. Kicking things off at number 2, we move high into the Andes to the Inca Empire, where virginity was enforced through fire, fear, and divine authority. Among the Incas, virginity was not a private matter, but a concern of the state, especially for the Akla, known as the Virgins of the Sun. These girls were chosen for physical perfection and flawless skin, and were confined within the Aklawasi, where they served the sun god Inti by weaving sacred textiles and brewing ritual drinks like chicha. If any Akla was suspected of breaking her vow of celibacy, she faced a terrifying test. She was forced to blow into a smoldering fire or a bed of dying embers. Inca belief held that a pure virginal breath carried spiritual power capable of communicating with fire. If the embers flared into a bright, clear flame, her chastity was confirmed and her bond with the gods affirmed. If the fire failed to ignite or was extinguished, it was interpreted as proof that she had been corrupted through sexual activity. In reality, the reaction of embers depends entirely on oxygen flow and fuel type, not sexual history, making the test impossible to pass consistently. Those who failed often faced ritual execution, including the horrifying practice of being buried alive to avoid spilling the sacred blood of a former sun virgin. Coming in at number 3, we encounter one of the most invasive and anatomically fictional virginity tests ever practiced, found within certain Spanish Roma gypsy communities. This ritual, known as the Gitanos test, was based on belief in a completely imaginary structure called the uva. According to this tradition, a grape-like gland existed inside the vagina and contained a yellowish fluid that would be released only during a woman's first sexual penetration. The release of this fluid was believed to mark the loss of honra or honor, while its presence was considered definitive proof of premarital virginity. The verification took place during a ceremonial gathering attended by members of both the bride's and groom's families. A white handkerchief known as a pañuelo was inserted into the vagina during the first act of intercourse to collect evidence. Observers looked for blood and the mythical yellow fluid supposedly produced by the uva. If the cloth showed the expected stains, the bride was publicly declared a virgin, and the handkerchief was displayed as a symbol of pride and family honor. If not, the consequences could be immediate and devastating, including social rejection or annulment of the marriage. This ritual reduced a woman's worth to physical evidence produced by a gland that does not exist, transforming an intimate act into a public spectacle. It stands as a powerful example of how misinformation about female anatomy was used to control women and tie the honor of entire family lineages to a biological impossibility within the context of bizarre virginity tests used in the past. Landing at number 4, we enter the Middle Ages, where virginity testing took a disturbing turn into pseudo-mathematics and bodily geometry. history. Medieval physicians, desperate to avoid direct gynecological examination, believed a woman's sexual history could be decoded through external measurements. One popular theory claimed that sexual intercourse caused the neck to thicken because so-called animal spirits were redirected from the genitals to the rest of the body. A test emerged that relied on measuring the circumference of a woman's forehead using a piece of string, then comparing it to the circumference of her neck. According to medieval logic, a true virgin would have a perfect match, meaning the string that circled the forehead would meet precisely when wrapped around the neck. If the string failed to meet because the neck was thicker, the woman was declared corrupted by sexual experience. This method depended on a rigid ratio equating forehead circumference with neck circumference, treating the body like a mathematical equation of virtue. The test completely ignored natural variations in anatomy, muscle development, weight distribution, and medical conditions such as goiter. Despite this, it appeared in manuals intended for physicians and prospective husbands as a reliable method for assessing a woman's purity. By turning the neck into a supposed record of sexual activity, medieval society enforced an arbitrary standard that humiliated women and condemned many as impure based solely on their natural skeletal structure, rather than any factual evidence. Sliding into number 5, we encounter a medieval obsession with bodily fluids, where urine itself became a supposed window into virginity. Medieval medical texts, particularly De Secretis Mulierum, promoted the idea that a woman's sexual status could be diagnosed through the appearance of her urine. According to these writings, the urine of a virgin was always clear and lucid, sometimes described as white or sparkling like crystal. In contrast, the urine of a sexually active woman was expected to be muddy, cloudy, or dark, symbolizing internal, moral, and physical decay. To intensify the test, medical authorities recommended the use of strong diuretics. A woman suspected of lying about her virginity was forced to drink large quantities of these fluids. If she could retain the urine for a prolonged period without relieving herself, she was declared a virgin. The logic rested on the metaphor of the leaky vessel, where sexual activity supposedly loosened both moral discipline and physical control. A woman unable to hold her urine was labeled a leaky sieve, equating bladder control with sexual purity. This ordeal caused extreme discomfort and risked public humiliation, reinforcing the idea that a woman's worth depended on her ability to function as a sealed container rather than as a human being with natural biological needs. Coming in at number 6, we reach one of the most famous and symbolically powerful virginity tests rooted in legend, known as the Trial of the Sieve. This test originates from the Roman story of the Vestal Virgin Tuccia, who in 145 before Christ was accused of unchastity. According to accounts by Valerius Maximus and Pliny the Elder, Tuccia prayed to the goddess Vesta and proved her innocence by carrying water from the river Tiber to the temple of Vesta using a sieve without losing a single drop. This miraculous act turned the sieve into a lasting symbol of virginity throughout European history. It appeared frequently in medieval art and iconography, including portraits of so-called virgin queens, such as Elizabeth I, representing control over bodily leakage. In medieval folklore, the legend was transformed into a real test for young women. A maiden might be handed a sieve and instructed to fill it with water, with the expectation that divine intervention would prevent the water from escaping if she were pure. Modern scientific understanding suggests this could only work if the sieve was unusually fine or shallow enough for surface tension to temporarily hold the water. For most women, the test was designed to fail, as standard sieve would drain immediately. The requirement of a miracle to pass perfectly illustrates the impossible standards imposed on women, implying that only supernatural suspension of natural laws could ever truly prove female virtue. Number 7, we return to classical Greece, where virginity was judged not through science or testimony, but through a deeply invasive aesthetic inspection of the female body. According to historian Hannah Blank, Greek society widely believed that a woman's virginity could be visually identified by the appearance of her nipples. Virgins were expected to have nipples that were small, pink in color, and pointing upward, features associated with youth, innocence, and the absence of sexual stimulation. This narrow physical ideal became an unspoken but powerful standard used by men to assess the moral worth of potential brides. In contrast, sexual experience was believed to permanently alter the body. Women who had engaged in intercourse were said to develop nipples that were dark, enlarged, and angled downward. This belief completely ignored biological realities such as hormonal changes, genetics, aging, and natural bodily development. Despite its lack of scientific basis, the theory functioned as a convenient visual shortcut that allowed men to claim authority over a woman's sexual history without her consent. By tying social value to the color, size, and orientation of nipples, Greek culture infantilized women and transformed normal physical maturation into supposed evidence of moral corruption, reinforcing control through visual judgment alone. Moving into number 8, we encounter one of the most disturbing and obscure virginity tests rooted in regional folklore from the rural American South. In this belief system, virginity was thought to be so biologically pure that it could react violently to male bodily secretions. The test involved collecting earwax on a fingertip, usually by a father or a potential suitor, and pressing it directly against the woman's vulva. The logic claimed that if the contact caused pain or made the woman cry out, it proved she was a virgin because her body was experiencing male-produced secretions for the first time. If she showed no reaction, it was assumed that her body had already become accustomed to masculine fluids through sexual activity, and she was labeled unclean. This ritual was not only a severe violation of physical boundaries, but also deeply manipulative. The person performing the test could control the pressure applied, ensuring almost any outcome they desired. It stands as a chilling example of how folklore transformed ordinary bodily substances into tools of sexual surveillance and gendered oppression, leaving women powerless against accusations constructed entirely by those judging them. Coming in at number 9, we examine the trial by water, a ritual shaped by religious doctrine and medical superstition in the Byzantine world. This test drew inspiration from the Old Testament book of Numbers, where a woman accused of adultery was made to drink bitter water before a priest. If her body reacted with swelling or illness, her guilt was confirmed, but if she remained unharmed, she was declared innocent. This idea was later echoed in the apocryphal Protevangelium of James, which described a similar test used to verify the virginity of the Virgin Mary after her pregnancy was discovered. In Byzantine and Mediterranean practices, accused women were made to drink water infused with substances such as black amber or jet. They were expected to show no physical reaction, and in some cases, to retain the liquid without discomfort. Any sign of illness, pain, or inability to hold the water was interpreted as proof of sexual corruption. These trials were often conducted publicly in churches or temples, turning private accusations into communal spectacles. The trial by water reveals how religious belief and pseudo-medicine merged into a system where divine judgment was believed to manifest through bodily reactions, placing immense psychological and physical pressure on women accused of sexual misconduct. Closing the list at number 10, we confront the most widespread and enduring virginity test in human history: the inspection of blood on the wedding bed. Known as Blaga Rakia in Macedonia, the Red Apple tradition in Armenia, and the Red Sheet ceremony among India's Kanjar community. This ritual demanded physical proof of virginity through bloodstains caused by a ruptured hymen. After the wedding night, an older female relative, such as a yenge or village matriarch, was assigned to retrieve the sheet and display it publicly as evidence of the bride's purity and the family's honor. If blood was absent, the consequences could be devastating, including immediate divorce, family rejection, honor violence, or even death. Modern medical science confirms that up to 50% of virgins do not bleed during first intercourse due to hymen elasticity or prior physical activity. Despite this reality, women throughout history were forced into desperate measures to protect their lives, including secretly applying animal blood from chickens or roosters to the bedding. The red sheet ritual transformed a private moment into a public audit, making a woman's survival depend on a biological outcome that was never guaranteed and entirely beyond her control. Even today, these bizarre virginity tests are not just history, but a living reality, carried out by modern states under the disguise of law, medicine, and security. From invasive fiancé tests at British airports to military-enforced examinations in Egypt and Indonesia, the same patriarchal logic continues to treat the female body as something to be inspected, controlled, and owned. Modern medical science has made one truth absolutely clear: no physical examination can determine a woman's sexual history, and practices like the two-finger test have been condemned by global health authorities as torture. Across centuries, these rituals all serve the same purpose: to police women and preserve male power through anatomical myths. Remember, virginity is a social construct, not a medical fact, and no woman's worth can ever be measured by smoke, water, blood, or pain. If this video made you think, share your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe for more deeply researched content, and thank you for watching.